Well, I'm telling you, I am unbelievably humbled and honored. Thank you for those kind words, and thank you for making me remember ninth grade. Although I must admit, when I was first told that you were going to give me this amazing honor, I really thought you thought I was Ralph Bunche. You can see it's a generational joke. You get it. But this award means so much to me for many reasons. One is because, in some ways, my whole life, my career, my professional and personal life has been shaped by three things. Shaped by a love of family, a love of the New York Yankees. You can boo. Okay. Gotcha. But more importantly, a love of history. It is that fascination with the past that has shaped my career and informed my life. From an early time, I remember my grandfather. He imbued me with a sense of historical curiosity. Once, when he was reading a book to me, he died the day before I turned 5, so I wasn't 5 years old. And he's reading a book, and he came across a picture, 19th century image of children in school. And I'm fascinated, these kids are my age. And then he said that more than likely so much time has passed that everybody in the picture is dead. And as a little kid, you're looking at it thinking kids look like me. And then he said, the caption reads, unidentified children. And he said, isn't it a shame that people can live their lives, die, and all it says is unidentified? And that has shaped my entire life. Because of that, I have really tried to live a career that simply said, how do I use history to make visible those that are often forgotten, and how do I give voice to the anonymous? But history has continued to shape my life in ways that growing up in that little town in North Jersey, I needed. We were one of the few black families in that town, and I experienced racism, hatred, pain, and I remember very much, I loved baseball. And I remember going to a neighborhood that wasn't my own to play baseball. And all of a sudden, the baseball game turned into a mob attack on me. 15 kids started hitting me with bats. And I remember running, terrified, running through neighborhoods, cutting through backyards, not knowing where to go, and suddenly I was exhausted. And I remember running up a driveway and collapsing in the front yard of someone's house. And I turned and saw the mob coming, and I remember being terrified because I hated living in that town, I hated what was gonna happen to me. And just at that moment when the hate took over, a little girl, a little blonde girl, came out of the house and said, get off the land. And I thought she was talking to me. She was talking to the mob. She stood between me and the mob. And I remember from that point, I wanted to understand why some people hated and other people helped. And for me, it was history that helped me grapple with the challenge of race and gave me the tools to help me understand the origins of the tensions in my little town, but also inspired me to believe that change was possible. The power of history has always shaped my life. Working at the Smithsonian early in my career, I was asked to curate an exhibition on the 19th century. And while a lot of the stories were about immigration and other stories, I wanted to tell the story of slavery. And I decided I wanted to tell that story through the lens of a single plantation. So I traveled all around the country looking at rice plantations and sugar plantations and cotton plantations. And then I was taken to a rice plantation above Georgetown, South Carolina. And there was a man, Princey Jenkins, he was 93 years old, and he had lived in an extant slave cabin with his enslaved grandmother. So you could imagine, for a historian, this is the Holy Grail. Somebody that could tell you what it was like. And he told amazing stories about how his enslaved ancestors took a broom and swept the ground in front of the cabin so there'd be no grass or there'd be no vermin. And he talked about how children were asked to watch the chimney so it wouldn't fall or catch on fire. He talked about the crops that his grandmother grew in the back of the house. And then we went to the fourth side, Or rather, I went to the fourth side. Mr. Jenkins didn't come. And I said to him, what happened over here? He said, son, I'm not going over there. Finally, after sort of calling out and saying, listen, I came all the way from Washington, D.C., help me out. Why don't you tell me what's over here? He said, son, I'm never going over there because there's nothing but rattlesnakes over there. Now, after I stopped running, I said to him, why didn't you tell me? And he said words that have shaped my life. He said, you know, people used to remember. Now they forget. I'm not sure what a historian does, but if your job is to help people remember, then you've got to help them remember not just what they want, but help them remember what they need. And in some ways, that challenge to help people remember what they need has been so much a part of my life and so much a part of the power of the humanities, to help us grapple with, to help us understand the complexities of our world, our society. I would argue that the humanities are needed now more than ever. So many people are struggling to find meaning, to find their identity in this changing America. But it's the humanities that holds the key to our shared humanity, and it's the humanities that are the essential tool that offers contextualization and opportunities for all to find answers, guidance, and maybe even a little hope in dealing with the challenges of contemporary America. I am always struck when I hear economists and CEOs and futurists talk about the skills that are needed by a 21st century workforce. They emphasize the needs for the best laborers to have a nimbleness, an ability to adapt and to anticipate. And they call for a worker force that is independent. But where better than the humanities to look for those skills? For me, the future is tied to our ability to embrace the humanities, understand how we are made better by that embrace. But I would argue maybe the most important thing I feel the humanities do is that the humanities help citizens embrace ambiguity. Because too often, Americans settle for simple answers to complex questions. What a gift we give. What a gift we give America if we help people understand that complex questions need complex answers. To help people understand that learning and growth and real understanding comes from wrestling with the shades of gray on the edges of ambiguity. These issues, these humanities, are at the heart of what we tried to do at the newest museum of the Smithsonian, the National Museum of African American History and Culture. 13 years ago, we began with a staff of 2. We had no building, no architect, we knew no location, and unlike any other Smithsonian museum, we had no collections, and we had no money. Oh no, my youngest daughter did give me $7.37, so we started with the bank. But what we had was a commitment to use history, to use the humanities, to fulfill the dreams of so many generations who believed that America would be made better by creating a museum on the National Mall that would explore and preserve the rich history of the African Americans. And we had a vision to accomplish that. We believed strongly that maybe, just maybe, as John Hope Franklin used to always say to me, the most important place is to craft a museum that is a place of memory, meaning, and remembering. It had to be a place that would, as John would say, tell the unvarnished truth. You'd have to be able to cry as you pondered the pain of slavery and segregation, but you'd have to find the joy that is in this community. You have to tap your toes to Duke Ellington or Aretha Franklin or somebody from the hip-hop world. I have no idea who that would be. But you tap your toes nonetheless. But what you would do is not only would you help America confront its tortured racial past, but you had to use African American culture and history as a lens to help us all better understand what it means to be an American. What was crucially important is to say, this is not a story of a community for a community. This is a story that says the African American experience is the quintessential American experience. It's the experience that shapes us all. When we want to know about our core values of optimism, spirituality, and resiliency, where better to look than within this community? So for us, the key was to be that two-sided coin, to remember, but to remember that this is a story bigger than you think it is. It's a story of us all. Ultimately, the goal of this new museum was simple. The goal was to use history, to use humanities, to make a country better, to tell the unvarnished truth, and ultimately help all who visit, who engage online, to help them find healing and reconciliation, and hope that we could elevate the conversation to include the role and the impact of history. Now, 13 years later, see, I wasn't gray until I took this job. 13 years later, the museum has been, I think, something that has been surprisingly successful for us. When the museum opened on September 24, 2016, I was in awe. I was in awe of the thousands of people who were there. I was in awe of the amazing speeches of President Obama talking about how history heals us as a country, and George Bush giving what I think is his best speech ever, talking about how, in many ways, a great nation doesn't run away from its past. And listening to John Lewis and others was an amazing day. It was a day, I would argue, that was America at its best. It was a day when Americans crossed party lines, racial lines, class lines, to accomplish the difficult and to remind us of the power and the strength of a united America. Since that day, the museum has become a place of history. It's become a pilgrimage site when you can get tickets. We expected 4,000 people a day. We get 8,000 people a day. We have had 5.5 million visitors in less than 2 years. But what I love more than anything else is that 40% of the visitors to the museum are non-African American, which means it's the most diversely visited museum in the world. And 33% of the people who enter the museum have never been to another museum in their lives. So talk about an educational opportunity. And for me, what I think is so powerful as somebody who was once a curator and wrote all those labels is that, people come to the Smithsonian and they usually spend an hour and a half in a museum. That's it. At our museum, we average 5.5 hours for visitors going through the museum. And what does that tell you? Why is that important? It's important because it reminds us of the excitement about history and the humanities. It reminds us that the publics will come if you engage them, if you craft it in a way that challenges them. Because I expect when you come to this museum, this is not a place to graze. You got to work. I want you to think. I want you to grapple. I want you to reflect. And as you grapple with the role of the humanities, my only commercial is remember museums. Museums educate more people than the number of people who attend professional sports events every year. It is one of the largest opportunities for people, especially over 21 or under 15, to understand history. And we think it's important that all of you who care about the humanities help challenge museums, help use museums, help make them a part of this struggle to help people value the humanities. That in essence, I guess, the best way for me to think about this museum and the humanities is that we walk in every day and I watch people come together who don't know each other and share stories. I watch grandparents share the stories with their grandchildren. I watch strangers find common ground over issues that divide us. So in essence, the museum, though it is the first green museum on the mall and it's got great exhibitions and artifacts, I think it really is important for me that it's a place that makes America better by illuminating all the dark corners of the American past and providing that space, that trusted space, where people can come together and grapple with what has divided us. So that's a long way of saying, I accept this award on behalf of all, you like that, right? I like that. On behalf of all those people who cared about history but never knew how to articulate their passion. I accept this award on behalf of all those enslaved women who got up every morning and hugged their children and refused to let the field strip them of their humanity or their hope by telling stories, by telling family history. I accept this on behalf of all those kids who left Brandeis University in 1964 to go south for the Freedom Summer, some of which didn't come back. And I accept this award on behalf of women like my grandmother, who scrubbed other people's floors and who's washed other people's clothing so her children and grandchildren would get an education and never would have to work on bended knee. This honor means so much to me because it's an affirmation of the importance of history. Ultimately, you don't recognize me. What you are recognizing is that there is nothing more powerful than a nation, than a people steeped in its history. And there is nothing more noble than honoring all of our ancestors by remembering. Thank you.